The rain pounded against the windows of Romano's as Amara Johnson clutched her phone for what felt like the millionth time in the last 20 minutes. The screen glared back at her, displaying 8:47 p.m. in stark white numbers. Each digit felt like a tiny knife twisting in her already wounded pride. Her blind date was now a staggering 2 hours and 47 minutes late, and the expensive red dress she'd snagged on sale 3 weeks ago suddenly felt like a costume for a role she was never destined to play. She fixed her gaze on the empty chair across from her, its burgundy leather seeming to mock her with its flawless, untouched perfection. The crisp white tablecloth stretched between them like a vast, desolate ocean of disappointment, and the single red rose centerpiece might as well have been a funeral arrangement for her dwindling hope. Around her, other couples were lost in their own little worlds, laughing over plates of steaming pasta and glasses of wine that cost more than she made in a single day slaving away at the city library. The waiter, a kindly older gentleman named Jeppy with distinguished salt and pepper hair, approached her table for what felt like the 100th time that evening. His eyes held a gentle pity that made her stomach clench with embarrassment. "Miss, perhaps another breadstick while you wait?" he asked softly, his charming Italian accent wrapping around the words like a warm blanket she desperately craved. Amara forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Yes, please, and maybe some water." She'd already downed 3 glasses of water, but asking for something free felt infinitely safer than actually ordering anything else. The measly $10 bill clutched in her purse was earmarked to cover a simple appetizer, certainly not a full-blown meal at one of the city's most upscale restaurants. Her coworker Tom had confidently assured her that her date, some high-rolling businessman, friend of his cousin, would foot the bill for dinner. "Has loaded, girl. Don't even sweat it," Tom had said with that cocky grin that now seemed incredibly naive and ill-informed. But the businessman had never materialized, and here she sat, a beautiful African-American woman in a stunning red dress, slowly withering from humiliation right before an audience of complete strangers. What stung the most wasn't even the missed date itself, but what it represented. This evening was supposed to be her fresh start, her chance to meet someone who might genuinely appreciate her gentle spirit and deep love of books. Instead, it felt like a cruel confirmation of every insecurity that relentlessly kept her awake at night. Maybe she truly wasn't pretty enough, successful enough, or interesting enough to ever deserve real, lasting love. At the table, right next to hers, she noticed a distinguished man in an expensive navy suit sitting with a sweet little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. The child had bouncy dark curls that danced whenever she moved her head, and she wore a bright blue dress adorned with delicate white flowers that made her look like a tiny, adorable princess. The man himself was handsome in that understated, quiet way that suggested inherent confidence rather than outward arrogance, with kind, warm brown eyes and perfectly styled black hair that somehow managed to look impeccably put together even after what had clearly been a long and demanding day. The little girl, whose name Amara later learned was Sophie, had been subtly stealing glances at Amara throughout the entire evening, her big, innocent brown eyes brimming with pure, childlike curiosity. When she finally caught Amara looking back, she offered a shy, tentative little smile. That was the first genuine warmth Amara had felt all night. "Daddy," Sophie whispered, gently tugging on her father's sleeve. "Why does the pretty lady look so sad?" Nathan Rodriguez followed his daughter's inquisitive gaze to the woman sitting alone at the next table. He'd been watching her too, though Head tried his best to be discreet about it. There was just something about her quiet dignity in the face of such obvious disappointment that struck him deeply. She carried herself with such remarkable grace, even as her hope visibly crumbled with each passing minute. "I think she's waiting for someone who might not be coming," Nathan replied softly, his heart inexplicably aching for this complete stranger, who somehow felt strangely familiar. Sophie's face scrunched up in that adorable way it always did when she was thinking incredibly hard about something truly important. "That's not fair. She's really pretty, and she looks so nice. Why wouldn't someone want to have dinner with her?" Nathan found himself unable to answer that question because he was secretly wondering the very same thing. The woman was undeniably beautiful, with warm, radiant brown skin that seemed to softly glow under the restaurant's subdued lighting, and her natural hair was pulled back in an elegant style that perfectly framed her delicate face. But even beyond her obvious physical beauty, there was something deeper, something intangible, that drew his attention and held it captive. Maybe it was the genuine way she thanked the waiter each and every time he checked on her. Or perhaps it was the way she carefully and meticulously folded her napkin between each of her nervous fidgets with her ever-present phone. "Can we help her somehow?" Sophie asked, her sweet voice carrying the innocent, unwavering certainty that all problems in the world could be easily solved with just enough simple kindness. Nathan's heart swelled with overwhelming pride for his daughter's endlessly compassionate nature. Ever since losing her mother 2 years ago, Sophie had become even more acutely sensitive to the pain of others, as if recognizing suffering had somehow made her even more fiercely determined to fight against it wherever she happened to find it. "What did you have in mind, sweetheart?" Sophie's eyes immediately lit up with a brilliant idea. "Could you pay for her dinner? Like how Mama used to buy coffee for the lady at the park who was always shivering and cold." The bittersweet memory hit Nathan like a gentle, unexpected wave. His late wife, Elena, had indeed been exactly that type of person, always quietly helping strangers in any way she could, leaving unusually large tips for struggling waitresses and buying groceries for elderly neighbors who couldn't quite make ends meet. It was undoubtedly one of the things he had loved most about her, and seeing that exact same compassionate spirit shining so brightly within Sophie made his chest feel incredibly tight with both profound grief and immense pride. "That's a beautiful idea," he said, discreetly signaling Jeppa with a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture. The waiter approached their table with practiced discretion. "Yes, Mr. Rodriguez, the lady at table 12, Nathan said quietly. "I'd like to take care of her entire meal tonight. Please don't mention my name. Just tell her it's been handled by someone who hopes she has a lovely evening." Jeppy nodded with quiet understanding. He had worked at Romano's for 15 long years and had certainly seen his fair share of both human cruelty and kindness. "Of course, sir. Should I suggest anything in particular?" "Whatever she would like. Price is not a concern." As Jeppy turned and walked away, Sophie beamed brightly up at her father. "Mama would be so proud of you, Daddy." Nathan squeezed her small hand tightly, feeling Elena's familiar presence in the simple act of kindness they were sharing. "She'd be proud of both of us. It was your idea, after all." Across the small space that separated their tables, Amara was completely unaware that her evening was about to change in the most unexpected and profound of ways. She had finally resigned herself to the fact that her date was definitely not coming, and was currently trying to calculate whether she could realistically afford both the bus fare home and the single, inexpensive appetizer she had hesitantly ordered when Jeppy suddenly appeared beside her table with a warm, reassuring smile. "Do you believe in guardian angels? Because sometimes they arrive in the most unexpected forms, sitting at the very next table when we desperately need them most." What would you have done in Amara's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories that prove that love can truly bloom in the most unlikely of places. The elegant restaurant around them hummed with lively conversation and the gentle clinking of silverware against delicate china plates. But for just a brief moment, it felt as though the three of them inexplicably existed in their own isolated little bubble of possibility. Nathan watched as Jeppy prepared to deliver the surprising news that would undoubtedly change not just Amara's evening, but potentially all of their lives, in ways that none of them could yet even begin to imagine. Jeppy approached Amara's table with the practiced grace and quiet confidence of someone who had delivered both incredibly good news and devastatingly bad news countless times over the course of his long and distinguished career. His weathered hands carried a sleek leather folder that seemed to subtly glow with hidden possibilities under the soft, flattering restaurant lighting. "Miss Johnson," he began, his charming Italian accent somehow making her name sound like a beautiful, romantic melody. "I have some wonderful news for you this evening. Amara looked up from her phone, where she had been composing and then painstakingly deleting increasingly desperate text messages to Tom about his missing cousin's mysteriously absent friend. Her warm brown eyes, which had been bravely fighting back tears of humiliation and disappointment for the better part of the past hour, now held a hesitant flicker of curiosity mixed with cautious skepticism. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some kind of mistake," she said softly. "I haven't actually ordered anything except the bruschetta, and I was actually just about to—" Jep held up a gentle hand, his warm smile growing even wider. "No mistake at all, dear lady. Your entire evening has been generously taken care of by another kind patron who wishes to remain completely anonymous. Everything you order tonight is entirely covered." The unexpected words hit Amara like a sudden physical force, leaving her momentarily speechless and stunned into disbelief. Her first immediate instinct was to politely refuse, to gracefully decline this incredibly generous offer from a complete stranger. Growing up, her wise grandmother had always taught her to be extremely wary of accepting gifts from people she didn't even know, warning her that there was almost always a hidden price to pay for such seemingly unexpected acts of kindness. I can't possibly accept that," she stammered, her hands trembling slightly as she nervously reached for her purse. "It's incredibly kind, but I couldn't possibly let someone—" "With all due respect, miss," Jeppy interrupted gently. "The gentleman was very specific. He said to tell you that kindness given freely expects absolutely nothing in return, and that refusing his offer would actually hurt his feelings far more than accepting it would help yours." The older man's eyes twinkled mischievously with something that looked suspiciously like he had been a part of similar conversations many times before. "In my 15 years here, I have witnessed countless acts of generosity, but very rarely one given with such pure and selfless intention. This person simply saw another human being having a particularly difficult evening and wanted to help in any way they possibly could. Nothing more, nothing less." Amara felt the carefully constructed emotional walls she had painstakingly built around herself, slowly beginning to crumble and dissolve. The logical, practical part of her mind, the same part that meticulously balanced her meager budget down to the very last penny each and every month, quietly whispered that she desperately needed this unexpected help. The $10 clutched tightly in her purse would barely cover the bus fare back home if she actually ordered anything substantial to eat, and she hadn't eaten anything since her hurried, unsatisfying lunch 6 long hours ago. "Are you absolutely sure they don't want anything at all?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am absolutely certain, dear. The only request was that you thoroughly enjoy your evening and know, without a shadow of a doubt, that there are still good, genuinely kind people in this world." As if summoned by their very conversation, a sweet, small voice piped up from the direction of the neighboring table. "Excuse me, pretty lady." Amara turned to see the adorable little girl in the bright blue dress cautiously approaching her table with small, careful steps, clutching something small and delicate in her tiny hands. Behind her, the handsome man in the elegant navy suit was already rising from his chair with an apologetic expression, clearly intending to gently redirect his daughter back to their own table. "Sophie, remember what we talked about regarding bothering other diners?" he began. But the sweet little girl was already right at Amara's side, her big, innocent brown eyes filled with the kind of earnest concern that only children can genuinely manage without ever seeming intrusive or annoying. "I made this for you," Sophie said, extending her small hand to reveal a delicate origami flower meticulously crafted from a simple white napkin. The tiny, intricate creation was surprisingly detailed, with carefully folded petals that beautifully caught the restaurant's warm, flattering lighting. "You looked really sad, and flowers always make me feel better when I'm sad." Amara's breath caught sharply in her throat. The simple, heartfelt gesture, offered with such innocent sincerity, nearly shattered the last of her carefully maintained emotional defenses. She gently accepted the paper flower with hands that visibly shook, cradling it as if it were made of real, delicate petals. "This is the most beautiful flower anyone has ever given me," she said, and she truly meant every single word. "Did you actually make this all by yourself?" Sophie nodded proudly, her bouncy dark curls dancing. "My mama taught me how to make them before she went to heaven. She said that when we make pretty things for people, it's like giving them a little piece of our very own heart." The complete innocence of the statement, delivered with such matter-of-fact acceptance of profound loss, made Amara's eyes well up with fresh tears. But these were definitely not the tears of embarrassment and disappointment that had threatened to overwhelm her all evening. These were tears of profound recognition, of seeing something truly beautiful and pure in the midst of what had felt like total rejection. Nathan had finally reached their table by now, and he placed a gentle, reassuring hand on his daughter's small shoulder. "I'm so sorry," he said sincerely to Amara, his warm voice carrying a genuine warmth that resonated deep within her. "Sophie has a habit of adopting anyone who looks like they might need a friend. Please don't apologize," Amara said softly, carefully placing the precious origami flower on her table where she could easily see it. "This is genuinely the kindest thing that's happened to me, well, in a very long time." There was something in the way she said it, a subtle vulnerability, that made Nathan's heart clench with immediate recognition. He saw reflected back in her beautiful eyes the same kind of quiet, persistent pain that he had been carrying with him for the past 2 long years. The unmistakable look of someone who had reluctantly grown accustomed to being disappointed by life, but who had not yet completely given up hope entirely. "I'm Nathan Rodriguez," he said, extending his warm hand. "And this is Sophie, Amara Johnson," she replied, gently shaking his hand and marveling at how incredibly warm and steady it felt. "It's lovely to meet you both." Sophie, emboldened by the positive reception of her thoughtful flower, spontaneously climbed up onto the empty chair directly across from Amara without even asking for permission. "Are you waiting for someone? Because you keep looking at your phone. Just like my daddy does when he's worried about being late for work." Nathan started to gently redirect his daughter once again, but Amara laughed for the first time all evening. It was a genuine, rich sound that seemed to instantly light up her entire face. "I was waiting for someone," Amara admitted honestly, "but I definitely don't think they're coming anymore. Sometimes people disappoint us, even when we really hope they won't." Sophie considered this revelation with the utmost seriousness that only a perceptive 6-year-old can possibly bring to truly important matters. "Well, that's just silly of them. If I had a dinner date with you, I would definitely come. You seem really nice, and you obviously like flowers." "Sophie," Nathan said gently, though his eyes were clearly twinkling with barely suppressed amusement at his daughter's refreshingly straightforward logic. "Perhaps we should let Miss Johnson enjoy her dinner." But Jeppe, who had been discreetly watching this heartwarming interaction with the pleased expression of someone witnessing a perfectly executed plan flawlessly coming together, carefully chose that exact moment to interject. "Actually," he said smoothly, "if I may suggest, we do have a lovely table for 4 available in the garden area that just recently became available. Sometimes the very best remedy for a disappointing evening is a little unexpected company." Amara looked back and forth between Nathan's genuinely kind face and Sophie's hopeful expression, feeling as though the universe was unexpectedly offering her something she hadn't even realized she desperately needed. Every logical, practical part of her mind screamed at her to politely decline, to sincerely thank them for their incredible kindness, and to quickly retreat to the familiar safety of her comfortable solitude. But the delicate origami flower sitting right there on her table seemed to quietly whisper that maybe, just maybe, it was finally time to say yes to something beautiful. "I would absolutely love that," she suddenly heard herself saying. "If you're sure I wouldn't be intruding, of course." "You wouldn't be intruding at all," Nathan said quickly. "In fact, I honestly think Sophie would be incredibly disappointed if you said no at this point," as Jeppe gracefully led them to a charming table in the restaurant's secluded garden area, where twinkling fairy lights danced delicately among carefully tended plants, and the soothing sound of a small fountain provided a gentle, comforting background melody. Amara couldn't help but feel that her unexpectedly disappointing evening was somehow magically transforming into something truly special. She still had absolutely no idea who had actually paid for her dinner, though she strongly suspected it might have something to do with the generous man walking right beside her and his incredibly wise and perceptive little daughter. But for the first time in what felt like months, she wasn't questioning the almost surreal gift. Instead, she was simply feeling immensely grateful for it, and for the powerful reminder that genuine kindness still undeniably existed in the world. The enchanting garden area of Romanos felt like stepping directly into a whimsical fairy tale. Soft, inviting white lights were strategically strung between the delicate branches of small, potted trees, creating breathtaking patterns of gentle illumination that softly danced across the surrounding walls. The fragrant air was filled with the unmistakable scents of fresh basil and rosemary emanating from the lush herb garden that gracefully surrounded their cozy table, and the soothing sound of cool water gently trickling from a small, ornate fountain added a peaceful melody to their increasingly engaging conversation. Amara settled comfortably into her cushioned chair, still protectively clutching the delicate origami flower that sweet Sophie had so thoughtfully given her. The stark contrast between this beautiful moment and her earlier feelings of despair felt almost surreal, as if she had somehow walked through some invisible doorway into a completely different evening altogether. "This place is absolutely beautiful," she said, genuinely looking around with wide-eyed wonder. "I honestly had no idea Romanos even had a garden area." "Most people don't," Nathan replied, settling Sophie into the chair right beside him. "Jep only brings certain, very special guests back here. I think he somehow has a sixth sense about when people might need something a little extra special." Sophie was practically vibrating with barely contained excitement in her seat, her bright eyes darting back and forth between the twinkling fairy lights and Amara's face, as if she couldn't quite decide which was actually more fascinating. "Do you like fairy tales, Miss Amara? Because this place looks exactly like where a beautiful princess would have dinner. I absolutely love fairy tales," Amara said, her warm smile becoming more natural and genuine by the minute. "Actually, that's a big part of my job. I work at the children's library downtown, and I get to read exciting stories to kids every single day." Sophie's audible gasp was immediately followed by an excited squeal. "You work at the library? The big one, with all the books and that awesome storytime corner with the rainbow carpet?" "That's the one," Amara replied with a smile. "Do you know it well?" "Know it? Of course I know it." Sophie looked up at her father with uncontainable excitement. "Daddy, this is the library lady." "Well, maybe not the same one, but she actually works where we go for story time every single Saturday." Nathan felt a sudden jolt of surprised recognition. He and Sophie had become regular visitors to the downtown library ever since Elena's tragic death, finding immense comfort in the predictable, comforting ritual of story time and the quiet, welcoming sanctuary that books undeniably provided. It seemed almost impossible to believe that this kind woman, who had unexpectedly appeared in their lives like an answer to a silent prayer neither of them had even realized they were praying, was actually connected to one of their favorite, most cherished places. "You might have actually seen us there then," Nathan said. "We're usually there right around 11 o'clock on Saturday mornings. Sophie here is our resident expert on princess stories and pretty much anything involving talking animals." "I definitely think I would have remembered you," Amara said, and then instantly blushed slightly at how that particular sentence sounded. I mean, Sophie's infectious enthusiasm for captivating stories definitely tends to stand out. Most kids her age get pretty restless after about 10 minutes or so, but some special children just have that truly unique and unwavering love for books. Jeppy reappeared at their cozy table with perfect, impeccable timing, carrying elegant menus and a warm, inviting bread basket that smelled absolutely heavenly. "For our special guest this evening," he announced with a flourish, "I would highly recommend starting with our exquisite antipasto platter, and perhaps some of our homemade minestrone soup. And for our charming young princess," he added with a mischievous wink at Sophie, "we have fresh mozzarella sticks artfully shaped like sparkling stars." Sophie clapped her small hands together with pure delight. "Stars! Daddy, can we please get the star cheese?" "Of course, sweetheart. And Miss Amara, please feel free to order whatever your heart desires. This special evening is all about enjoying yourself to the absolute fullest." As they all looked over the elegant menus, Amara found herself relaxing in a way that she hadn't truly experienced in several long months. There was just something about Nathan's undeniable presence that felt both incredibly exciting and deeply comfortable, like unexpectedly coming home to a welcoming place she had somehow never actually been before. He possessed the rare and admirable quality of giving his complete and undivided attention to whoever was speaking, whether it was his sweet 6-year-old daughter or a kind woman he had just happened to meet completely by chance. "So, how did you actually end up working at the library?" Nathan asked as they eagerly waited for their appetizers to arrive. "It seems like the absolute perfect job for someone who clearly loves stories as much as you do." "It really, truly is," Amara said, her face lighting up in a way that inexplicably made Nathan's chest feel incredibly warm. "I actually started out there as a volunteer when I was still in college, just shelving books and quietly helping out with events. But the amazing head librarian, Mrs. Chin, saw that I had a special way with the children during story time. When a coveted position opened up 3 years ago, she enthusiastically recommended me for it." "And you absolutely love it?" "I absolutely positively love it," Amara confirmed with a genuine smile. "There's just something truly magical about watching a child discover a particular story that deeply speaks to their very soul. Sometimes you'll see a shy, introverted kid come in week after week, barely participating in anything, and then suddenly they're raising their hand high to eagerly answer all of the questions, or even excitedly asking to hold up the book so everyone else can get a better look at the colorful pictures." She paused thoughtfully, gently tucking a stray strand of hair back behind her ear. "It probably sounds completely silly, but I honestly feel like I'm playing a small part in helping to create future readers, people who will happily carry these incredible stories with them for the rest of their lives." "That definitely doesn't sound silly at all," Nathan said sincerely. "It actually sounds like you're doing something that truly matters. Not everyone can honestly say that about their actual work." Sophie, who had been listening intently while meticulously arranging her cloth napkin into a variety of interesting shapes, suddenly looked up at Amara with a thoughtful expression. "Miss Amara, do you have a favorite story?" "Oh, that's definitely a tough question. I honestly love so many of them." Amara considered the question for a long moment, "but I think my very favorite has always been Beauty and the Beast, not particularly because of the obvious romance, but primarily because it's ultimately about looking past outward appearances to truly see who someone really is deep down on the inside. And it's also fundamentally about the remarkable power of genuine kindness to beautifully transform both the individual who gives it and the lucky person who ultimately receives it." Nathan felt something inexplicably shift deep inside his chest at her thoughtful words. There was something incredibly profound about the way she spoke so passionately about the remarkable power of kindness, as if she had both generously given it and gratefully received it in unexpected ways that had significantly shaped her entire understanding of the world. "What about you?" Amara asked, skillfully turning the thoughtful question right back to him. "Do you actually have a favorite story?" Nathan laughed, a warm, genuine sound that was noticeably deeper and far more authentic than his usual polite chuckles. "I have to readily admit that before Sophie came along, I was never really much of a story person at all. My entire world was primarily dominated by business reports and complex market analyses. But now," he looked at his sweet daughter with such immense love and tenderness that Amara felt her heart unexpectedly squeeze. "Now, I honestly think my favorite story might actually be The Velveteen Rabbit. There's just something so powerful and meaningful about the beautiful idea of becoming real through simply being truly loved that really speaks to me." The engaging conversation effortlessly flowed as naturally as the fountain's gentle bubbling. They happily discovered that Nathan's successful tech company had actually donated a number of computers to the library's new digital learning center, though he had quietly done it anonymously through a private foundation. They also learned that Amara had grown up just 3 short neighborhoods away from where Nathan had proudly bought his first small apartment as a young, ambitious entrepreneur. Sophie contributed her own insightful observations about everything from the unique way the twinkling fairy lights made interesting shadows dance on the walls to her well-researched theory that all of the very best stories absolutely had to have at least one unforgettable animal character who was capable of talking. When their eagerly awaited food finally arrived, the engaging conversation continued seamlessly without missing a beat. Nathan found himself genuinely curious about Amara's insightful thoughts on a wide range of topics, from her favorite books to confidently recommend to bright children Sophie's age, to her educated opinions about the city's progressive new literacy programs. There was an obvious intelligence in her well-articulated responses that went far beyond her undeniable education, a deep thoughtfulness that strongly suggested she was a uniquely compassionate person who truly listened to the beautiful world all around her. "Can I actually ask you something?" Amara said as they all shared the delicious antipasto platter, her sweet voice carrying a subtle note of genuine curiosity that had clearly been building throughout their unexpectedly delightful conversation. "Of course you can. Earlier, when Jeppy told me that someone had actually paid for my entire dinner, that was actually you, wasn't it?" Nathan paused with a piece of crusty bread halfway to his mouth, suddenly caught between wanting to respect and maintain the clearly anonymous nature of his thoughtful gift and not wanting to actually lie to this kind, compassionate woman who was currently looking directly at him with such disarming honesty. Sophie, however, had absolutely no such qualms whatsoever about complete and utter honesty. "Your daddy paid for your dinner because I told him you looked sad, and we should help you out. Mommy always said that helping folks was the best way to make some new friends." Sophie's revelation was delivered with such straightforward honesty that Nathan couldn't help but smile, despite the depth of it all. "It's okay," Amara responded, her eyes flitting between them, an expression of gratitude mixed with something deeper that Nathan couldn't quite put his finger on. "I was kind of hoping it was you, actually. It makes it feel less like charity and more like—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. "More like the kind of thing friends do for each other." "Friends," Nathan repeated, the word feeling both perfectly suited and somehow lacking in the face of what was blossoming between them. "I hope we can be friends," Amara said, and then, with a burst of courage that even surprised herself, added, "All 3 of us." Sophie's face lit up as if she'd just heard the most amazing news of the week. "Can we be the kind of friends who have more dinners together? Because this is the most fun I've had in forever, and you make Daddy smile in a way he hasn't since Mommy went to heaven." The innocent observation hung in the air, laden with a weight that all 3 could feel. Nathan felt exposed, a vulnerability that should have been unsettling, but somehow wasn't. Amara felt her heart expanding in a way that should have been frightening, but instead felt like coming home. "I would love to have more dinners together," Amara said softly, looking directly at Nathan as she spoke. "If that's something you'd both like." Nathan realized that the answer to that question was so incredibly obvious that he wondered why Head even wasted a single moment pondering it. "I think," he said, his voice laced with a warmth that made Amara's pulse race, "that would be the best thing that's happened to us in a very long time." As if to put a stamp on their newly declared friendship, Jeppe materialized with a dessert menu and that knowing smile of his. "Perhaps," he suggested, "something sweet to celebrate new friendships. I have a feeling this is going to be a very special evening indeed." The following morning dawned with that crisp, clear autumn sunshine that makes the world appear freshly scrubbed and brimming with promise. Amara arrived at the library a full 30 minutes early, which was highly unusual for her, but she'd been far too excited to sleep soundly and decided that organizing the children's section would be a far more productive outlet for her nervous energy than tossing and turning in bed, replaying every single moment of the previous evening. The downtown library was her sanctuary, a place where she felt most assured and capable. Constructed in the 1920s, it still retained much of its original magnificence, boasting soaring vaulted ceilings, tall windows that allowed streams of golden light to flood in, and that comforting, familiar aroma of books that had been cherished by countless readers over the decades. The children's section held a particularly special place in her heart, a vibrant corner that she had helped redesign 2 years prior, complete with rainbow-colored carpet squares, low shelves thoughtfully arranged to create inviting reading nooks, and child-sized furniture painted in lively primary colors. As she straightened the picture books and prepared for the day's first story time, Amara found it impossible to stop thinking about Nathan and Sophie. There had been something undeniably magical about the entire evening. The effortless flow of conversation, the way Sophie had seemed to blossom under the attention of 2 adults who were genuinely interested in her thoughts and observations. She was arranging a new display of books centered on the theme of friendship when she heard familiar voices coming from the library's main entrance. Her heart gave a little flutter as she recognized Sophie's excited chatter echoing through the high-ceilinged space. And she makes voices for all the different characters, and she knows which books have the best pictures. And she gave me the prettiest flower made out of a napkin that I'm going to keep forever. Amara smiled to herself, deeply touched by the child's unbridled enthusiasm, and walked toward the entrance to greet them. But what she saw there made her stop dead in her tracks. Nathan was dressed in a more casual manner than the night before, sporting dark jeans and a forest green sweater that accentuated the warm brown tones of his eyes. He carried a large coffee cup and wore that slightly harried expression of a single parent trying to keep pace with an energetic 6-year-old first thing in the morning. Sophie bounced alongside him in a bright red coat and matching hat, practically vibrating with excitement. "Miss Amara," Sophie called out as soon as she spotted her, breaking free from her father to dash across the library's marble floor. "You're here. Daddy said we could come visit you at work if it was okay. And I told him it would definitely be okay because librarians love when people come to visit books." "Sophie's right," Amara said, gathering the little girl into a hug that felt as natural as breathing. "Librarians absolutely adore visitors, especially ones who are so excited about books. Good morning, Nathan." "Good morning," he replied, and there was something in his voice that transformed the simple greeting into more than just polite conversation. "I hope you don't mind us dropping by." Sophie woke up this morning with very specific plans about how we should spend our Saturday. "I don't mind at all. Actually, story time doesn't start for another hour, so we have the children's section mostly to ourselves. Would you like me to show Sophie some of the new books that came in this week?" "Can we, Daddy, please?" Sophie was already tugging on Nathan's hand, trying to pull him toward the colorful corner that had so thoroughly captured her attention. "Lead the way," Nathan said, allowing himself to be guided by his daughter's infectious enthusiasm. As they settled into the story time area, Amara found herself effortlessly slipping into her role as a children's librarian, but with a heightened awareness of Nathan's presence that made everything feel more meaningful. She selected a few books she thought Sophie might enjoy, including a new adaptation of Cinderella with stunning illustrations and a story about a little girl who befriended a dragon. "This one is special," she told Sophie, holding up a book with a shimmering cover, because the little girl in the story discovers that being kind to others creates magic in her own life. Sophie's eyes widened as she took the book and carefully opened it to the first page. "The pictures are so pretty. Look, Daddy, the little girl has curly hair like mine." Nathan settled into one of the small chairs, his long legs looking somewhat comical as he folded himself to fit the child-sized furniture. "She does look like you," he agreed, but his eyes were on Amara as she knelt beside his daughter, patiently pointing out details in the illustrations. There was something about watching Amara in her element that made Nathan's chest feel constricted with an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. She moved with such natural grace among the children's books and brightly colored furniture, her voice taking on different inflections as she read snippets of stories to Sophie. More than that, she seemed to genuinely delight in his daughter's reactions, laughing at Sophie's observations and encouraging her questions in a way that made the little girl glow with confidence. "Miss Amara," Sophie said after they had looked through several books, "do you think you could write us a story? Not for story time, just for us. I would love to, Amara replied, setting aside the stack of books she had been holding and selecting another about a princess who saved her kingdom through acts of kindness rather than relying on magic spells. As she began to read, using different voices for each character, Nathan found himself drawn into the story almost as much as Sophie was. But even more than the story itself, he was captivated by the way Amara brought it to life. Her voice was musical when she read the princess's dialogue, gruff and amusing for the dragon, and warm with wisdom when she spoke the narrator's words. Sophie hung on every word, occasionally gasping at the exciting parts or giggling at the funny voices. And they all lived happily ever after, Amara concluded, closing the book with a satisfied smile. That was the best story ever, Sophie declared, clapping her hands together. The princess was so smart to be nice to everyone, even the grumpy dragon. She was very smart, Amara agreed. Sometimes being kind takes more courage than being brave in other ways. Nathan felt those words strike a chord within him in a way that surprised him. He had spent so much of the past 2 years focused on being strong for Sophie, on building walls around both of them to protect against further loss, that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to simply be kind without expecting anything in return. As if reading his thoughts, Amara looked up and met his gaze. There was something in her eyes that made him feel understood in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Daddy," Sophie said, tugging on his sleeve, "can we ask Miss Amara something important?" "What's that, sweetheart?" Sophie looked back and forth between her father and Amara with the serious expression she wore when she was about to say something she considered very significant. "Well, yesterday you said that the library needed more money for new books and programs, and you're always saying we should help people when we can. And Miss Amara works here and loves books as much as we do." Nathan felt a smile tugging at his lips as he realized where his daughter's incredibly logical mind was heading. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I think," Sophie said carefully, "that maybe you could help the library get more books and better programs. You know, like how you helped that school get new computers, but you told me not to tell anyone it was you." Amara looked confused, glancing back and forth between father and daughter. "I'm sorry, what school?" Nathan felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had thought his charitable giving was more discreet than it apparently was to his observant 6-year-old. "Sophie has a very good memory for conversations she's supposed to forget. Daddy gives money to lots of places to help kids," Sophie explained matter-of-factly. "But he always tells them not to say his name because he says helping people isn't about getting credit. It's just about making things better." The simple statement, delivered with a child's absolute honesty, made Amara's breath catch. She looked at Nathan with new understanding, seeing not just the successful businessman who had paid for her dinner, but someone who quietly made the world a better place without seeking recognition. "Sophie," Nathan said gently. "We've talked about this, but this is different," Sophie interrupted, her voice taking on the passionate tone she used when she was absolutely certain she was right. "This is Miss Amara's library, and she helps kids every day, just like you do. But she needs help, too. And we like her, so it would be helping someone who's our friend." Amara felt tears prick at her eyes, both at Sophie's generous heart and at the implication of what Nathan's help could mean for the library. They had been struggling with budget cuts for 2 years, forced to limit programming and postpone necessary updates to their children's section. The idea of having the resources to expand their reach, to help more children fall in love with reading. "I couldn't possibly ask you to," she began, but Nathan held up a hand. "You're not asking," he said quietly. "Sophie is suggesting. And honestly, she's right. I've been looking for meaningful ways to support literacy programs in the city, and I can't think of anywhere that would use funding more effectively than here." "But this is my workplace," Amara protested, though her heart was racing with possibility. "It would be too much, too generous." "Miss Amara," Sophie said, reaching over to take her hand with the solemn gravity of a much older child. "When people want to help because they care about you, it's okay to let them. That's what friends do." The wisdom in those simple words, coming from a 6-year-old who had already learned more about loss and love than most adults, completely broke through Amara's defenses. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, looking directly at Nathan. "A complete renovation and expansion of the children's section," Nathan said, his voice taking on the confident tone of someone who was used to turning ideas into reality. "New books, updated technology, expanded programming, maybe a dedicated space for teenagers, and definitely funding for additional staff so you're not trying to do everything yourself." Amara's eyes filled with tears she didn't even attempt to hide. That would change everything. We could reach so many more children, create programs we've only dreamed about." "Then, well, do it," Nathan said simply. "On one condition." Amara's heart skipped a beat. "What condition?" "That you let Sophie and me help with the planning. We want to be involved, not just as donors, but as friends who care about making this the best children's library in the city." Sophie bounced in her seat with excitement. "Can we help pick out the new books and maybe the colors for painting the walls?" "You can help with everything," Amara said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I have one condition, too." "Name it," Nathan said. "This has to be something you do because you believe in it, not because you feel sorry for me or because Sophie asked you to. I need to know that you really think the library deserves this investment." Nathan stood up from the tiny chair and moved closer to where Amara was kneeling beside Sophie. When he spoke, his voice held a sincerity that made her pulse quicken. "Amara, I've seen you with Sophie for less than 24 hours, and I can already tell that you have a gift for reaching children, for making them feel valued and excited about learning. If you can do that with one little girl in just one evening, imagine what you could do with the right resources and support. This library doesn't just deserve this investment. The children of this city deserve to have someone like you helping them discover the magic of books." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name. Sophie, with the intuitive understanding that children sometimes possess, looked back and forth between the two adults and smiled with satisfaction. "This is going to be the best library ever," she declared. "And Miss Amara, now you can help even more kids find their favorite stories." As they spent the rest of the morning exploring the library and discussing possibilities for the renovation, Amara felt as though her life was being rewritten before her very eyes. Less than 24 hours ago, she had been sitting alone in an expensive restaurant, convinced that she was destined for disappointment. Now, she was walking through her beloved library with a man who saw her dreams as worthy of investment, and a little girl who had somehow claimed a permanent place in her heart. When story time officially began, and other children and parents started arriving, Nathan and Sophie stayed to watch Amara in action. As she read to a group of 15 children, bringing the characters to life with voices and gestures, Nathan understood exactly why his daughter had been so drawn to her. There was something magical about the way Amara connected with each child, making sure the shy ones felt included and gently redirecting the more boisterous ones without dampening their enthusiasm. But what struck him most was the pure joy on her face as she shared the stories with the children. This wasn't just a job for her, it was a calling. And somehow, miraculously, that calling had led her to them. If someone had told you yesterday that your entire life could change because of one act of kindness, would you have believed them? Sometimes, the most beautiful love stories begin not with romance, but with generosity. What's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? 3 weeks had passed since that first Saturday morning at the library, and Nathan found himself looking forward to their daily interactions with an eagerness that both surprised and concerned him. What had started as Sophie's innocent friendship with Amara had blossomed into something far more complex, though none of them had explicitly acknowledged the shift that seemed to be happening. Nathan had thrown himself into the library renovation project with the same intensity he brought to his business ventures, but for entirely different reasons. This wasn't about profit margins or market dominance. This was about creating something beautiful for someone who deserved beautiful things, and about giving his daughter a chance to see how incredibly powerful it could be when people worked together toward a shared goal. Today was special. After weeks of planning meetings and consultations with contractors, Nathan had surprised both Amara and Sophie by suggesting they take a break from the renovation discussions and spend the day at Sunset Point Amusement Park. It was the kind of spontaneous adventure that the old Nathan, the one who lived and breathed quarterly reports and board meetings, would never have even considered on a Wednesday afternoon. But the new Nathan, the one who had learned to see the world through Sophie's eyes, and increasingly through Amara's as well, had called in a few favors and completely cleared his schedule. "Daddy, are you sure Miss Amara will like the roller coasters?" Sophie asked for the third time as they waited outside the library for Amara to finish her workday. She was wearing a bright green sundress that made her look like a tiny spring flower, and her excitement practically radiated from her small frame. "I think Miss Amara is braver than you might expect," Nathan replied, though he honestly had no idea how Amara felt about amusement park rides. The realization that there were still so many things he didn't know about her made his chest feel tight with anticipation. When Amara emerged from the library's main entrance, Nathan felt his breath catch in his throat, the same way it had every time Head seen her over the past few weeks. Today, she wore a flowing blue dress that caught the afternoon breeze, and her hair was loose around her shoulders, which made her look younger and somehow more approachable than her usual professional librarian attire. "I can't believe you're kidnapping me from work in the middle of the week," she said. But her smile was bright enough to power the entire amusement park. "When you said you had a surprise, I was expecting maybe coffee and a discussion about paint colors for the new reading nook." "Coffee is boring," Sophie declared, taking Amara's hand with the casual possessiveness that had developed over their weeks of friendship. "Daddy said we needed to do something fun because you've been working too hard on the library plans, and you deserve to have adventures." Amara looked at Nathan with an expression that made him feel like he had just accomplished something far more significant than any business deal he had ever closed. "You said I deserved adventures?" "I said everyone deserves adventures," Nathan replied, though the slight flush on his cheek suggested there was more to it than that. "But yes, especially people who spend their days making sure other people can have adventures through books." The drive to Sunset Point was filled with Sophie's chatter about which ride she wanted to try first, and Amara's gentle questions about which ones Sophie might find too scary. Nathan found himself stealing glances at Amara in the passenger seat, noticing the way she turned her body toward Sophie when she spoke, and how she seemed to instinctively know just how to respond to his daughter's mix of excitement and nervousness. "Miss Amara," Sophie said as they pulled into the parking lot, "will you ride the Ferris wheel with me and Daddy? It goes really high up, but you can see the whole city from the top." "I would love to ride the Ferris wheel with you," Amara replied, "though I should probably warn you that I'm not very good with heights. I might need to hold on to both of you." Sophie giggled at this admission. "That's okay. Daddy's really strong, so if you get scared, he can hold your hand." The innocent suggestion made both adults pause for just a moment, each acutely aware of the implications of hand-holding and what it might signify in the context of whatever was developing between them. "Well," Nathan said, clearing his throat slightly, "we should probably start with some of the smaller rides and work our way up to the Ferris wheel." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of laughter, cotton candy, and the kind of uninhibited joy that Nathan had almost forgotten was possible. They started with the carousel, where Amara and Sophie rode painted horses side by side while Nathan watched from the ground, taking pictures with his phone and marveling at how natural they looked together. Sophie's confidence grew with each ride, and soon she was begging to try the small roller coaster that wound through a miniature version of an enchanted forest. Amara, despite her admitted fear of heights, gamely agreed to accompany her. "Are you sure about this?" Nathan asked as they waited in line, noting the slight paleness around Amara's eyes as she watched the cars climbing the first hill. "Sophie wants me to ride with her," Amara said simply. "Besides, you can't let fear stop you from having experiences, right?" The ride itself was relatively mild by amusement park standards, but Amara's reaction was anything but mild. She screamed with genuine terror on the first drop, clutched Sophie's hand throughout the entire ride, and emerged at the end looking slightly green, but laughing with the kind of breathless excitement that comes after surviving something genuinely frightening. "That was amazing," she gasped, steadying herself against the railing as they exited the ride. "Terrifying, but amazing." Sophie was bouncing with excitement. "You were so brave, Miss Amara, and you made the funniest faces during the scary parts." "I'm glad my terror was entertaining," Amara replied, but she was grinning broadly, and Nathan found himself studying her face, noting the flush of adrenaline in her cheeks and the way her eyes sparkled with accomplishment. There was something incredibly attractive about her willingness to push past her comfort zone for Sophie's sake, and about the genuine joy she took in conquering her fears. "Your turn, Daddy," Sophie announced. "You and Miss Amara should ride together while I go on the spinning teacups." The suggestion was clearly calculated, delivered with the kind of innocent manipulation that 6-year-olds have perfected over centuries. Nathan and Amara looked at each other, both aware that they were being managed by a child, but neither particularly inclined to resist. "The teacups might make you dizzy right after the roller coaster," Nathan warned his daughter. "It'll be fine," Sophie said with the confidence of youth. "Besides, the nice lady who runs the ride said she'd help me pick out the prettiest teacup. You two should ride the bumper cars." 15 minutes later, Nathan found himself sitting beside Amara in a bright red bumper car, both of them laughing as they attempted to coordinate their steering and generally failed. Spectacularly. Amara, Nathan discovered, harbored a surprisingly competitive spirit, reveling particularly in the successful bumping of other go-karts, especially those occupied by teenagers who clearly believed themselves too sophisticated for such amusement. "I had no idea you were so ruthless," Nathan commented as they exited the go-kart after several rounds of light-hearted vehicular combat. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet," Amara responded, her tone imbuing the simple statement with the weight of both a promise and a tantalizing invitation. They retrieved Sophie from the teacup ride, where, true to form, she had located the most charming cup, adorned with roses and golden accents, and had successfully persuaded the ride operator to grant her an extra spin. Her cheeks glowed with pure joy as she excitedly recounted how the entire park had resembled a whirling kaleidoscope of vibrant colors. "Now, can we go on the Ferris wheel?" she implored, grasping both adults by the hand and leading them toward the towering structure that dominated the park's landscape. The Ferris wheel at Sunset Point was truly a sight to behold, tall enough to offer sweeping vistas of the entire city and the serene lake beyond. As they settled into their gondola, the three of them found themselves pressed together on the cozy bench seat. Amara became acutely aware of Nathan's comforting warmth beside her and the reassuring solidity of his arm as Sophie insisted on positioning herself between them. "Look how tiny everything looks," Sophie exclaimed, her voice filled with wonder as their car reached the apex of the wheel's rotation. "It's like we're giants gazing down upon a miniature dollhouse city." Amara followed Sophie's gaze, taking in the expansive view of downtown buildings, tree-lined neighborhoods, and the shimmering expanse of the lake stretching into the distance. Yet, more than the breathtaking scenery, she found herself captivated by the present moment, seated here with these two individuals who had, in such a remarkably short period, become so profoundly important to her. "It's beautiful," she murmured softly. "Yes, it is," Nathan agreed. But when Amara glanced his way, she realized his gaze was not directed at the view at all. He was looking directly at her. The moment lingered between them, charged with unspoken possibilities and the kind of tender awareness that precedes significant life changes. Sophie, nestled between them and oblivious to the subtle currents of adult emotion, continued her running commentary on the sights below. "Miss Amara," she said as their car began its slow descent, "this is the best day I've had since Mama went to heaven. Do you think she can see us up here?" The question, posed with a child's matter-of-fact acceptance of loss and unwavering hope, caused both adults to pause. Amara felt Nathan's hand gently find hers across Sophie's small frame, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture of comfort and connection that felt more intimate than anything she had ever known. "I think," Amara said carefully, "that if your mama loved you as much as it sounds like she did, then she would be happy to see you having such a wonderful time, and I think she would be proud of how kind and brave you are." Sophie considered this with the solemnity she reserved for all matters of great importance. "I think she would like you, Miss Amara. Daddy says Mama always wanted him to find someone who would make him smile again." The innocent statement hung in the air as their car reached the ground and the ride operator opened the gate. As they strolled away from the Ferris wheel, Nathan's hand remained intertwined with Amara's. All three seemed to sense that something significant had just transpired. Though none of them were quite ready to articulate it, they concluded the day by sharing a dinner of classic amusement park fare. Soft pretzels, funnel cake, and lemonade that was almost too sweet but utterly perfect for the occasion. Sophie drifted off to sleep in her booster seat on the drive home, exhausted from the day's excitement and sugar rush, leaving Nathan and Amara to converse quietly in the front seat as the city lights blurred past their windows. "Thank you for today," Amara said as they pulled into the library parking lot where her car awaited. "I can't remember the last time I laughed so much." "Thank you for being willing to be kidnapped," Nathan replied. Sophie was right. "You know, this was the best day she's had in a long time. The best day we've both had." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each keenly aware that they were at one of those pivotal crossroads where everything could shift based on what transpired next. "Nathan," Amara began softly, "I need you to know that these past few weeks, getting to know you and Sophie, it's meant more to me than I think you realize. But I also need to know that this is real, that it's not just about Sophie needing a mother figure or you feeling grateful because I'm helping with the library." Nathan turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the dim glow of the parking lot lamps. "Amara, what I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the fact that you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. You make me remember what it feels like to hope for something more than just getting through each day." The raw honesty in his voice caused Amara's breath to catch in her throat. In the back seat, Sophie stirred slightly in her sleep, eliciting a shared smile from both adults. "I'm scared," Amara admitted. "I'm scared of caring this much about both of you, and I'm scared of what it means if this is really happening." "I'm scared too," Nathan said, reaching over to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I'm more scared of letting fear stop me from finding out what we could be together." As he walked her to her car and watched her drive away, Nathan felt a sense of peace settle within him, a feeling of rightness he hadn't experienced since Elena's passing. Tomorrow they would return to renovation meetings, budget discussions, and the delicate dance of two adults attempting to merge their lives. But tonight, beneath the starlit sky and the lingering enchantment of a perfect day, anything seemed possible. The autumn evening air was crisp and clear as Amara stood outside Nathan's downtown penthouse building, clutching a bottle of wine she had spent a good 20 minutes agonizing over at the grocery store. This marked her first visit to his home, and the invitation carried a weight that made her both exhilarated and anxious. Over the past month, their relationship had evolved into a comfortable rhythm of daily texts, weekend outings with Sophie, and stolen moments of conversation during library planning sessions. But tonight felt different. Tonight, Sophie had explicitly requested that Amara come to their home for dinner, and Nathan had extended the invitation with a warmth in his voice that sent her pulse racing. The building itself was impressive in a subtle, understated manner that hinted at genuine wealth rather than ostentatious display. The doorman greeted her by name, suggesting that Nathan had anticipated her arrival, and the elevator ride to the 23rd floor provided her with just enough time to second-guess her outfit choice 3 times. She had ultimately decided on a flowing maroon dress that was elegant enough to show she had made an effort, yet casual enough that she wouldn't feel overdressed if it turned out to be a simple family dinner. She wore her hair loose around her shoulders and adorned her ears with the small gold earrings her grandmother had given her for good luck. As the elevator doors opened directly into Nathan's foyer, Amara's breath caught in her throat. The space was breathtakingly beautiful, managing to be both elegant and welcoming, with its warm hardwood floors, carefully curated artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning panoramic view of the city below. "Miss Amara," Sophie's voice echoed through the apartment as she came bounding toward the elevator, clad in a bright blue dress with a full skirt that swirled perfectly as she spun around. "You're here. Come see what Daddy and I made for dinner." "Hello, sweetheart," Amara said, accepting Sophie's enthusiastic hug. "Something smells absolutely amazing. We made chicken parmesan and garlic bread and Caesar salad, and Daddy let me help with everything except the knife parts," Sophie reported proudly. "And we have chocolate cake for dessert that we bought from the fancy bakery because Daddy said homemade cake is really hard, and we didn't want to mess up your special dinner." Nathan emerged from what Amara assumed was the kitchen, wearing dark jeans and a burgundy sweater that accentuated the warm tones in his complexion. His hair appeared slightly tousled, as if he had been running his hands through it, and a small spot of flour adorned his sleeve, which somehow made him even more attractive. "Sophie has given you the complete menu rundown, I see," he said, smiling in a way that made Amara feel like she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Welcome to our home." "Thank you for having me," Amara replied, offering him the wine bottle. "I brought this, though I should probably warn you that my knowledge of wine comes entirely from reading the little tags they put on the bottles at the store." "It's perfect," Nathan said, accepting the bottle and studying the label with what seemed like genuine appreciation. "Besides, the company is far more important than the wine." Sophie tugged on Amara's hand, eager to provide a tour of their home. "Come see my room. I cleaned it specially for you, and I want to show you my book collection." As Sophie led her through the apartment, Amara was struck by how much it felt like a genuine home rather than a wealthy bachelor's showplace. Photographs were displayed everywhere, many featuring Sophie and a beautiful woman with dark hair and kind eyes who could only be Nathan's late wife. But rather than making Amara feel uncomfortable, the presence of these memories felt right, as if Elena's love for her family had created a foundation of warmth that still permeated the space. Sophie's room was a 6-year-old's paradise, featuring a canopy bed draped in pink and white fabric, walls covered in artwork she had clearly created herself, and bookcases filled with children's books arranged with the kind of meticulous organization that suggested they were treasured possessions. "This is my special reading corner," Sophie announced, gesturing toward a small nook furnished with cushions and a child-sized lamp. "Daddy reads to me here every night before bed. Maybe sometime you could read to me here, too." The hopeful question, posed with a child's innocent directness, caused Amara's heart to clench with tenderness. "I would love to read to you here sometime, if your daddy says it's okay." "He'll say it's okay," Sophie said with absolute confidence. "He likes you a lot. I can tell, because he smiles different when you're around, and he hums when he's making coffee in the morning after we talk to you on the phone." Before Amara could fully process this revelation, Nathan appeared in the doorway. "Sophie, I think our guest might like to see the rest of the apartment before dinner gets cold." "Just one more thing," Sophie said, rushing to her bedside table and retrieving the origami flower Amara had made for her that first night at Romano's. It sat in a place of honor next to a framed photo of her parents, carefully preserved despite its delicate napkin construction. "You kept it," Amara said softly, touched by the evidence of how much that simple gesture had meant. "It's my most special treasure," Sophie replied matter-of-factly. "Besides, Mama's jewelry box and the book you gave me about the brave princess." As they made their way to the dining room, Nathan gently touched Amara's arm. "I hope the photos don't make you uncomfortable," he said quietly. "Sophie needs to see her mother as part of our daily life, and—" "They don't make me uncomfortable at all," Amara interrupted. "They make me feel like I understand both of you better." She was beautiful, Nathan. Sophie looks so much like her. "She has Elena's eyes and her fearless heart," Nathan agreed. "But lately, she's been developing a stubborn streak that I suspect might be entirely her own." Dinner was a revelation in domestic bliss. The chicken parmesan was cooked to perfection, and the conversation flowed effortlessly between adult topics and Sophie's observations on everything from why flowers came in different colors to her theories about the occupations of the various residents in the apartment building across the street. Nathan and Amara fell into an easy rhythm of shared parenting, with Nathan cutting Sophie's food while Amara reminded her to use her napkin. both responding to the little girl's chatter with a patient attentiveness that made her beam with confidence. "Miss Amara," Sophie said as they cleared the dinner plates, "will you help me show Daddy the picture I drew for him? It's a surprise, but I need help explaining it." "Of course," Amara replied, following Sophie to the living room where art supplies were spread out across a coffee table. The drawing was undeniably the work of a 6-year-old, complete with stick figures and bold primary colors. But the subject matter caused both adults to pause. Sophie had drawn 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow, clearly representing Nathan, herself, and Amara. Above them, a 4th figure with wings watched from a cloud, smiling down at the group below. "That's Mama," Sophie explained, pointing to the winged figure. "And that's us being a family. I drew it because I think Mama would be happy that we found Miss Amara to help take care of us." The innocent explanation, delivered with a child's unwavering faith in the rightness of her vision, left both adults speechless for a moment. Nathan knelt beside his daughter, his voice gentle as he spoke. "Sophie, sweetheart, you know that Miss Amara is our very good friend, but we can't just assume." "But she loves us," Sophie interrupted with the kind of logic that children apply to matters of the heart. "And we love her, and families are people who love each other and take care of each other, so we could be a family if everyone wanted to." Amara felt tears prick at her eyes as she gazed at the drawing, seeing her own deepest hopes reflected in a child's crayon masterpiece. The past few months had revealed to her what it might feel like to belong somewhere, to be part of something bigger and more meaningful than her carefully constructed, solitary existence. "Sophie," she said carefully, "what would you think if I told you that I do love you and your daddy very much?" Sophie's face lit up with a joy that could power entire cities. "Really? You love us?" "Really," Amara confirmed. "I love how kind and smart and brave you are, and I love how much you care about other people. And I love your daddy because he's a wonderful father and a good man who makes me feel like I can be braver than I thought I was." Nathan felt something fundamental shift within him as he listened to Amara's words. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his heart over the past 2 years seemed to crumble all at once, leaving him feeling exposed, hopeful, and terrified all at the same time. "And I love both of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "More than I thought I would ever be capable of loving anyone again." Sophie looked between the 2 adults with satisfaction, as if she had just successfully completed a particularly challenging puzzle. "So, we can be a family? A real one?" Nathan and Amara exchanged a glance over Sophie's head, both seeing their own hopes and fears mirrored in the other's eyes. There were practical considerations to address, timeline issues to navigate, and the complex task of integrating their lives in a way that would be healthy for all of them, especially Sophie. But in that moment, looking at this child who had somehow become the bridge between their hearts and feeling the undeniable rightness of their small circle of love, the answer seemed both obvious and inevitable. "I think," Nathan said carefully, "that we're already becoming a family. We just need to figure out what that looks like and how to do it right." "Can Miss Amara stay for story time tonight?" Sophie asked, clearly eager to initiate the family-building process immediately. "If she wants to," Nathan replied, looking at Amara with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "I would love to stay for story time," Amara said, "but only if you promise to let me help clean up the dishes first." "Deal," Sophie said, jumping up to hug both adults simultaneously. "This is the best day ever." As they worked together to clear the dinner dishes, moving around Nathan's kitchen with an ease that suggested they had been doing this for years, rather than just one evening, Amara felt a deep sense of belonging settle within her. This was what she had been waiting for her entire adult life, she realized. Not just romantic love, but this feeling of being part of something larger than herself, of being needed, wanted, and chosen by people who truly saw her. Later, as they sat on Sophie's bed reading stories about brave princesses and talking animals, Amara caught Nathan's eye over his daughter's head. What she saw there was love, certainly, but also gratitude, wonder, and the kind of hope that comes from believing in second chances. When Sophie finally drifted off to sleep, clutching the book they had been reading and smiling in her dreams, Nathan walked Amara out to the living room where the city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I need you to know," he said, taking her hands in his, "that when I say I love you, I mean all of it. I love your laugh and your kindness and the way you make Sophie feel like she's the most important person in the world. I love how you throw yourself into things you believe in, and I love that you were brave enough to say yes to this crazy situation we found ourselves in." "Nathan," Amara said, stepping closer to him, "I need you to know that I'm not trying to replace Elena or compete with her memory. I just want to love you and Sophie in my own way, to add to your family instead of trying to recreate something that's already perfect in its own right." "That's exactly what I was hoping you would say," Nathan replied, cupping her face in his hands. "Elena will always be Sophie's mother and a part of our story. But you're our future. You're the person who helped us learn how to be happy again." When he kissed her there on the couch, where Sophie's drawing still lay spread out across the coffee table, it felt like a promise, a beginning and a homecoming all at once. Outside, the city hummed with life, but inside Nathan's apartment, three hearts had finally found their way to each other. Are you wondering what happens when two broken hearts discover they can heal together? Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, built on love rather than obligation. Have you ever experienced a moment when you knew your life was about to change completely? Share your story below, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of love finding its way. The sound of power tools and cheerful construction chatter filled the library's children's section as Amara stood in what had once been a cramped corner with outdated furniture and now resembled something straight out of a fairy tale. 3 months had elapsed since that perfect evening at Nathan's penthouse, and the library renovation was nearing completion in spectacular fashion. Nathan had done more than simply fund improvements. He had orchestrated a complete transformation. The space now boasted custom-built reading nooks shaped like giant mushrooms and treehouses, interactive displays that brought stories to life with gentle lighting and sound effects, and a central storytelling area with tiered seating that could accommodate twice as many children as before. The walls were painted in soft blues and greens that evoked the feeling of being in an enchanted forest, and natural light streamed through new skylights, imbuing the entire space with a magical ambiance. "Miss Amara! Miss Amara!" Sophie's voice echoed through the construction noise as she came running through the maze of equipment and supplies, wearing a bright red hard hat that was comically oversized for her 6-year-old head. "Come, see what they're putting in the princess reading nook." Amara followed Sophie to one of the custom-built spaces where workers were installing fiber optic lights in the ceiling to create the illusion of reading under a starry sky. The attention to detail was breathtaking, from the hand-carved details on the wooden fixtures to the custom cushions designed to resemble flower petals. "This is incredible," Amara breathed, running her hand along the smooth wood of a reading bench. "Children are going to feel like they've stepped into their favorite stories." "That was the idea." Nathan's voice came from behind her, warm with satisfaction. He emerged through the construction maze, wearing jeans and a green flannel shirt, his sleeves rolled up, and a smudge of dust on his cheek that somehow made him look even more appealing. "Though, I have to admit, it's turned out even better than I imagined." "Better than times we imagined," Amara corrected, stepping closer to him. This was always a team effort. Over the past 3 months, they had developed a partnership that extended far beyond the library renovation. Nathan consulted Amara on every decision, from the color scheme to the selection of new furniture, while she provided the educational expertise that ensured every design choice would benefit the children who would use the space. More than that, they had learned to collaborate with an ease that suggested they had been partners for years rather than months. Sophie had appointed herself the official supervisor of the project, arriving each afternoon after her kindergarten classes to inspect the progress and offer suggestions that ranged from brilliant to utterly impossible. Her favorite addition was the story tree, a custom-built structure resembling an enormous oak tree with reading nooks nestled among its branches. "Daddy," Sophie said, tugging on Nathan's shirt to get his attention, "can we show Miss Amara the surprise now, please?" Nathan and Sophie had been conspiring about something for the past week, whispering together and giggling at shared secrets, in a way that made Amara both curious and slightly anxious. She had learned to trust their surprises, but she had also learned that Sophie's idea of a small gesture and Nathan's execution of that gesture could result in something far more elaborate than anyone expected. "I suppose now is as good a time as any," Nathan said, exchanging a look with his daughter that was full of barely contained excitement. "But we need to go to the main entrance area." They made their way through the library, past the adult sections that were continuing their normal operations while construction proceeded in the children's area. Amara waved to her colleague Jennifer, who was assisting a patron at the reference desk and who had been an invaluable asset throughout. "Okay, here's the English U.S. translation and rewrite, expanded and deepened as requested." Amara was instrumental in managing the library's day-to-day operations amid the renovation's chaos. At the main entrance, she stopped short, completely surprised by what Nathan and Sophie had been planning all along. Mounted prominently next to the entrance of the children's section was a gleaming bronze plaque, radiant in the afternoon sunlight that poured through the library's soaring windows. "The Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center," she read aloud, her voice catching ever so slightly on the words. "Dedicated to fostering the love of reading in young hearts, made possible through the generosity of the Rodriguez Family Foundation." Sophie was practically bouncing with excitement. "Do you like it, Amara?" "Daddy said we should name it after Mama because she loved books so much. He said she would have absolutely adored this place and that she would have loved you too." Amara felt tears well up in her eyes as she gazed at the plaque. She fully understood the significance of Nathan's gesture in naming the renovated space after Elena. It was a profound act. He wasn't erasing his late wife's memory. On the contrary, he was incorporating it into their new life together, forging a legacy that both honored the past and paved the way towards their shared future. "It's perfect," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "Your mama would be beyond proud to have her name associated with something that will benefit so many children. She would be proud of all of us." Nathan spoke quietly, coming to stand beside Amara and placing a gentle, reassuring hand on her back. "Your mom would be so thrilled that we were capable of creating something so beautiful together." His words carried layers of meaning that extended far beyond the library renovation itself. Over the past 3 months, they had, without a doubt, created something truly beautiful together. It wasn't just the physical space, but also a family dynamic that felt both incredibly natural and incredibly precious. Nathan and Amara had been exceptionally careful to proceed slowly, each keenly aware that Sophie's emotional well-being needed to be their absolute first priority. But the little girl had embraced their burgeoning relationship with an enthusiasm that often took the adults by surprise. "Can we have the grand opening ceremony soon?" Sophie asked, pressing her small face against the glass doors that led into the children's area, which was still very much under construction at that point. "I really want to invite everyone I know to come and see our library." "Our library?" Amara repeated, her smile so radiant that it made Nathan's chest feel warm, almost as if it had been touched by the sun. "I like the sound of that very, very much." The opening ceremony took place 2 weeks later on a bright Saturday morning, a day that felt touched by magic from the very beginning. The entire children's section had been completed, and the result was even more spectacular and breathtaking than anyone had dared to imagine. Local news crews had arrived to cover the story of the anonymous donation that had so dramatically transformed the space, although Nathan had insisted on keeping his identity private. He preferred to let the spotlight remain focused on the library and its vital mission. Families began arriving early, drawn by word of mouth and by the palpable excitement that had been building within the community for months. Children pressed their noses eagerly against the glass doors, their eyes wide with wonder as they caught glimpses of cozy reading nooks and captivating interactive displays that promised adventures beyond their wildest dreams. Amara stood near the ribbon that stretched regally across the entrance, wearing a flowing emerald-green dress that made her look like a woodland fairy, perfectly at home in the enchanted space that lay just beyond her. Her hair was swept back in an elegant twist, and she wore the pearl earrings that Nathan had given her the week before, just because, he had said, although they both knew it was really because he loved any excuse to shower her with gifts. Sophie stood proudly between Amara and Nathan, wearing a bright yellow dress with a full, twirling skirt, and carrying a pair of golden scissors that were nearly as tall as she was. She had insisted emphatically on being the one to cut the ribbon, arguing, with all the unshakable logic of a 6-year-old, that since she had helped plan everything, she should be the one to officially declare it open. Nathan watched his daughter and the woman who had become so much more than either of them had dared to hope for. He felt a profound sense of completion, a feeling he had never truly expected to experience again in his lifetime. The past few months had taught him that love didn't have to be rationed like a precious resource. Opening his heart to Amara hadn't diminished his love for Elena. Instead, it had somehow expanded his capacity for love in ways he was still actively discovering. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" he asked Sophie, who was practically vibrating with excitement at this point. "I've been ready forever," she replied, which was probably completely accurate considering that she had been asking about the opening ceremony every single day for the past 2 weeks. Amara stepped forward to address the crowd that had gathered, her voice carrying easily across the library's expansive main hall. "Welcome, everyone, to the official opening of the Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center. This space was created with love and with generosity. But, more than that, it was created with the deep understanding that every single child deserves access to stories, access to learning, and access to the pure magic that can be found within the pages of a book." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces in the crowd, parents holding toddlers, elementary school children bouncing with eager anticipation, and even a few teenagers who were trying their best to look far too cool to be excited, but who were clearly curious about the renovations they had been hearing about for months. The woman for whom this space is named, Elena Rodriguez, truly believed that books had the power to change lives. And it is our hope that everyone who enters here will find stories that speak directly to their hearts, that challenge their minds, and that remind them that anything is possible when we believe in the boundless power of imagination. The crowd erupted in applause, and Sophie raised the enormous scissors with the unwavering determination of someone preparing to perform the single most important task of her young life. With a little help from Nathan and Amara, she managed to cut cleanly through the ribbon, and the golden strands fell away, revealing the magical space beyond. What happened next was nothing short of pure joy in motion. Children raced exuberantly through the entrance, their excited voices echoing off the high ceilings as they eagerly discovered the hidden reading nooks, the captivating interactive displays, and the remarkable story tree that had quickly become the centerpiece of the entire space. Parents followed at a more leisurely pace, many of them taking pictures and marveling at the incredible attention to detail that had gone into every single corner of the renovation. Amara found herself swept along with groups of delighted children, enthusiastically explaining how the different areas worked and watching their young faces light up with pure joy as they discovered new possibilities for adventure and for learning. In the Princess Reading Nook, a shy 7-year-old girl had curled up with a book about a brave young queen and was completely and utterly absorbed in the story. Nearby, twin boys were taking turns reading to each other in the story tree's highest nook. Miss Amara called Maria Santos, one of the library's regular patrons. "This is absolutely incredible. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about it since she first heard you were doing renovations. Just wait until you see the teen section," Amara replied, gesturing toward an area designed to look like a modern coffee shop, complete with comfortable seating and convenient charging stations for electronic devices. "We wanted to create spaces that would grow right along with the children so that they would never, ever outgrow the library." Throughout the entire morning, Nathan stayed mostly in the background, content to watch Amara in her element and feeling a surge of pride that went far beyond personal satisfaction. She moved through the space with such natural grace, effortlessly connecting with each and every child who approached her, and somehow managing to make every single family feel welcomed and valued. Sophie had appointed herself as the unofficial tour guide, leading eager groups of children through the space and enthusiastically explaining all of the features with the passion of someone who had been personally involved in every single design decision. Her favorite stop was always the memorial plaque, where she would tell anyone who would listen all about her mama and how incredibly proud she would be of their beautiful library. "Daddy," she said, appearing suddenly at Nathan's side as the initial crowd began to thin out slightly. "I really think that Mama would really like Miss Amara." "I think so too, sweetheart," Nathan replied, watching Amara help a toddler reach a book on a high shelf, while simultaneously answering questions from the child's mother about upcoming programming. "And I think Mama would be so happy that we're taking care of Miss Amara now, because she doesn't really have any family except us." The innocent observation struck Nathan with unexpected force. Over the many months of getting to know Amara, he had learned about her quiet, somewhat solitary life, about how her parents had died when she was still in college, and about how she had no siblings with whom to share holidays or to celebrate achievements. She had built a life of service and quiet satisfaction, but it had also been a life without the kind of deep, meaningful connections that everyone needed in order to truly thrive. "You're right," he said, kneeling down to be at Sophie's eye level. "Miss Amara really does need people to take care of her, and we're so lucky that she lets us be those people. We're going to take very, very good care of her," Sophie declared with the fierce protectiveness that only 6-year-olds could bring to the people they loved. "And she's going to take really good care of us too, because that's exactly what families do." As the day wore on and the last of the opening ceremony visitors finally departed, the three of them stood together in the now quiet children's section, surrounded by the beautiful space that they had created together and by the immense sense of accomplishment that came from giving something so meaningful to their community. "I can't even believe that we actually did this," Amara said, settling onto one of the comfortable chairs in the main seating area and pulling Sophie onto her lap. "Just 3 months ago, this was all just a dream, and now it's real." "Well, the best dreams usually become real when the right people work together to make them happen," Nathan said, sitting down beside them and marveling at how incredibly right this all felt. The three of them, together, in this very space that represented everything they had built together. Sophie yawned, suddenly exhausted by the excitement of the long day. "Can we come here every day and read stories together?" "We can come here as often as you want," Amara promised, gently brushing a curl away from Sophie's forehead. "This is our special place now." As they prepared to leave the library that evening, carefully locking up the magical space that would welcome its first regular visitors on Monday morning, Nathan felt a sense of gratitude so profound that it was almost overwhelming. Just 6 months ago, he had been a man focused entirely on work and on raising his daughter, building protective walls around both of them to shield them from any further loss. Now, he was part of something so much larger and so much more beautiful than he had ever even imagined was possible. "Thank you," he said to Amara as they walked together to their cars in the library parking lot. "For what, exactly?" she asked, a hint of playful curiosity in her voice. "For saying yes to dinner that very first night, for saying yes to this entire project, and for saying yes to us." Amara smiled, the expression on her face soft and full of love in the warm glow of the parking lot lights. "Thank you for paying for my dinner when I was far too proud to even ask for help. Thank you for seeing something wonderful in me that I didn't even see in myself. And thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for letting me become a part of your family." As they drove home together, with Sophie chattering sleepily in her car seat about all the children who would get to enjoy their library, Nathan and Amara both understood that they had created something truly remarkable, something that would last far beyond their own lives. The Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center would serve thousands upon thousands of children over the years to come. But, even more significantly, it had served as the strong and lasting foundation for their own small families' very bright future. The spring morning was absolutely perfect for a picnic, with gentle sunshine filtering softly through the trees in Nathan's private garden and a soft, playful breeze that carried the intoxicating scent of blooming jasmine and roses. Amara had never even imagined that such a peaceful oasis could exist right in the very heart of the bustling city. Hidden discreetly behind the high walls that surrounded Nathan's luxurious downtown penthouse building, the garden was Nathan's own personal retreat, a space he had meticulously created after Elena's death as a quiet place to find solace and to remember the woman who had so deeply loved growing things. Now, 6 months after their very first meeting, he was sharing this most private and treasured space with Amara. And the immense significance of that simple gesture was not lost on either of them. "Daddy, can I show Miss Amara the butterfly garden?" Sophie asked, practically bouncing on her toes with excitement. She wore a bright green sundress that made her look like a small spring flower, and her curls were held back neatly with a headband decorated with tiny silk daisies. "Of course, sweetheart," Nathan replied, carefully spreading a blue and white checkered blanket on the lush green grass near a small fountain that gurgled peacefully in the very center of the garden. "But don't go too far, okay? Lunch will be ready very, very soon." Amara watched Sophie skip happily toward a corner of the garden, where vibrantly colorful flowers had been planted specifically to attract butterflies, marveling at the child's boundless energy and unwavering joy. Over the past 6 months, she had watched Sophie bloom from a sometimes shy little girl into a confident, happy child who seemed to find magic in the most ordinary, everyday moments. "She's truly incredible," Amara said, settling onto the blanket beside Nathan and gratefully accepting the glass of lemonade that he offered her. "Sometimes I can hardly even believe how incredibly lucky I am to be a part of her life." "We're the lucky ones, Amara," Nathan said, his voice filled with the warmth that always seemed to envelop it whenever he spoke about their blossoming relationship. "Before you came into our lives, Sophie was, well, she was fine, but she wasn't thriving the way that she is now. Having you to love has given her permission to be completely happy again." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Sophie chase a particularly beautiful monarch butterfly that seemed perfectly content to let her follow it from flower to flower. The past 6 months had been a gradual process of learning to be a family, with Nathan and Amara carefully taking their time to build a solid foundation of unwavering trust and deep understanding that would serve them well in the years to come. "Amara," Nathan said, his voice suddenly taking on a more serious tone, "there's something I want to talk to you about, something that I've been thinking about for quite a while now." Amara felt her pulse quicken, not with anxiety or worry, but with a sense of excited anticipation. There had been something subtly different about Nathan over the past few weeks, a quiet sense of decision and unwavering purpose that strongly suggested that he was preparing to take their relationship to the next and most significant level. "Him listening," she said softly, turning to face him fully. Nathan took both of her hands in his, and she was struck once again by how incredibly right it felt when he touched her, how his presence seemed to simultaneously calm and energize her. "I want to tell you about Elena," he began, "not because I think that you don't understand that part of my life, but because I want you to know just how much she would have loved you, and just how much she would have supported everything that we're building together." Amara squeezed his hands gently, encouraging him to continue speaking. She was the kind of person who genuinely believed that love multiplied when it was shared, that there was truly no limit to how much good we could create in the world if we simply opened our hearts to it. When she got sick, when we knew that she was dying, one of the things that she worried about the very most was that Sophie and I would close ourselves off from love completely after she was gone. Nathan's voice caught slightly, and Amara could see the raw emotion in his eyes as he shared memories that were still so incredibly tender. Even 2 long years later, she made me promise her that if I ever found someone who could love both Sophie and me the way that we deserved to be loved, I wouldn't let grief or fear stop me from embracing that gift. She said that the very greatest tribute that I could pay to our love would be to remain open to love in all of its forms. "She sounds like an absolutely amazing woman," Amara said softly, her voice full of genuine emotion. She was, without a doubt, and she was also incredibly wise about people. She had this almost uncanny ability to see straight through to someone's heart, to truly understand their very nature, even when they were trying their best to hide it. And I know, without any doubt whatsoever, that she would have seen in you exactly what Sophie and I see, someone with a capacity for love so incredibly deep and so genuinely heartfelt that it transforms everyone around her. Amara felt tears prick at her eyes, deeply moved by Nathan's beautiful words and by his extraordinary generosity in sharing Elena's memory with her in such an intimate and profoundly meaningful way. The thing is, Nathan continued, loving you hasn't diminished what I felt for Elena in any way. Instead, it's taught me that the human heart is capable of so much more than I ever even imagined. You've shown me that it's entirely possible to honor the past while still building towards the future, to remember what we've lost while also celebrating what we've found. Nathan, Amara began, her voice choked with emotion, but he held up a gentle hand to stop her. Just let me finish, please, because I really need to say this while I still have the courage. He took a deep breath, his eyes never once leaving hers. I am completely, utterly, head over heels in love with you, Amara Johnson. I love your infectious laugh and your unwavering kindness, and the way you make Sophie feel like she's the most important person in the entire world. I love how you throw yourself wholeheartedly into everything that you truly believe in, and I love that you were brave enough to let us into your life, even when you were scared. He paused for a moment, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small velvet box that made Amara's breath catch in her throat. But, more than anything else, I love the way that you've helped us to become a real family again. The way that you've made our house feel like a home again. And I'm really hoping, if you'll have us, that you'll let us spend the rest of our lives showing you just how much you truly mean to us. Nathan opened the box, revealing a stunning ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. A central diamond was surrounded by smaller stones that caught the afternoon light and seemed to sparkle with their own inner fire. Amara, will you marry me? The words hung delicately in the air between them, filled with unspoken hope, overflowing with love, and shimmering with the promise of a shared future that neither of them had dared to even dream of just 6 short months earlier. Amara looked at the ring, then at Nathan's face, which was full of both love and nervous anticipation, and finally at Sophie, who had abandoned her butterfly chasing in order to watch the proposal unfold from across the garden, her excitement barely contained. Yes, she said, her voice sounding surprisingly stronger and more certain than she had expected it to be. Yes, Nathan, I will absolutely marry you. The pure joy that spread across Nathan's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger was matched only by Sophie's shriek of delight as she came running across the garden to throw herself into their joyful embrace. You said yes! You said yes! Sophie shouted, bouncing excitedly between them with such unrestrained enthusiasm that all three of them ended up laughing and crying at the same time. Now we can be a real family forever and ever. We've been a real family for quite a while now, sweetheart, Nathan said, pulling both his daughter and his fiancée into a warm hug that felt like finally coming home. We're just making it official now. Can I be the flower girl at your wedding? Sophie asked, as if this was the most important question in the entire world. You can be anything you want to be at our wedding, Amara replied, marveling at how incredibly right it felt to say the words "our wedding" out loud. In fact, maybe you can even help us plan the whole entire thing. Sophie's gasp of absolute delight suggested that this was, without a doubt, the very best possible news that she could have received. As they settled back onto the comfortable picnic blanket, with Sophie nestled snugly between her soon-to-be parents and chattering excitedly about wedding dresses and flowers and cake, Nathan caught Amara's eye over his daughter's head. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. "For what?" she mouthed back, a question in her eyes. "For making us whole." The rest of the afternoon passed in a happy blur, with Sophie drawing elaborate pictures of wedding plans in the dirt beside the fountain, while Nathan and Amara talked about their future with the kind of easy, comfortable planning that came naturally from two people who had finally found their perfect match. They discussed tentative timelines, potential guest lists, and whether they wanted a big, extravagant celebration or something far more intimate and personal. But, even more than the logistics, they talked about the life that they wanted to build together. I want us to keep doing things just like this, Amara said, gesturing towards the beautiful garden and the perfect afternoon that they were sharing. I want Sophie to grow up knowing that love means making time for each other, creating beautiful moments together. She'll know, Nathan said with absolute certainty in his voice. She'll know, because she'll see us doing it every single day. As the sun began to set and they started to pack up their picnic supplies, Sophie made one final, very important request. Can we please call Aunt Isabella and tell her all about the engagement? She's been waiting for Daddy to ask Miss Amara to marry him for weeks and weeks. Nathan laughed, a sound that was full of affection and just a hint of slight embarrassment. Has she now? Yes. She said you were being way too slow about it, and that Miss Amara was absolutely perfect for us, and that she was going to start dropping very obvious hints if you didn't hurry up and propose soon. Well, Amara said, admiring the sparkling ring on her finger as it caught the very last rays of the setting sunlight. I'm really glad that you didn't let Aunt Isabella wait much longer. I honestly don't think that I could have handled much more suspense. That evening, as they sat together in Nathan's comfortable living room, making phone calls to share their happy news with family and close friends, Amara felt a profound sense of completion that went far beyond the initial excitement of getting engaged. This was what she had been waiting for her entire adult life, without even realizing it. Not just romantic love, but the undeniable feeling of being truly chosen by people who saw her for who she truly was, and loved her completely. Sophie eventually fell asleep on the plush couch between them, exhausted by the intense excitement of the day, and Nathan and Amara sat in comfortable silence, watching the twinkling city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Are you happy? Nathan asked softly, breaking the peaceful silence. I'm more than just happy, Amara replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. I'm home. The months that followed their engagement passed by in a whirlwind of wedding planning, library events, and the gradual, careful process of blending their lives together in preparation for their upcoming marriage. Nathan had very sweetly suggested that Amara move into the penthouse before the wedding, but she had gently insisted on waiting until after the ceremony, wanting Sophie to fully understand the profound significance of the commitment that they were making to each other. Instead, they had spent almost every evening together as a family, with Amara often staying for dinner and enthusiastically helping with Sophie's bedtime routine before returning to her small, cozy apartment across town. The arrangement had worked exceptionally well, building anticipation for their official union, while also allowing them to establish comforting routines and meaningful traditions that would serve them well as a married couple. Now, 3 months after Nathan's heartfelt proposal in the garden, they were carefully putting the final touches on what would undoubtedly be the most important and meaningful day of their lives. The wedding was planned for the following Saturday, to be held at the library in the very space where their unique relationship had truly begun to flourish. Amara had initially been surprised by Nathan's suggestion that they hold the wedding ceremony at the Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center, but the more that they discussed it, the more incredibly perfect it all seemed. The beautifully renovated space had become a powerful symbol of everything that they had so carefully built together: their shared values, their unwavering commitment to serving others, and their remarkable ability to create something beautiful through collaboration and love. Miss Amara, can you help me practice walking like a flower girl? Sophie asked, appearing in the doorway of what had once been Amara's lonely apartment and was now overflowing with boxes of belongings, all waiting to be moved to their new shared home. Over the past 3 months, Sophie had thrown herself into wedding planning with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything that excited her. She had very specific ideas about the flowers, roses, and daisies. Of course, the music, nothing too slow or too loud, and the cake chocolate with vanilla frosting, and maybe some strawberries. But, more importantly than all the details, she had embraced her role as flower girl, with the seriousness of someone who truly understood that she was helping to create a moment that people would remember forever. Of course, Amara responded, clearing a path through the towering stacks of moving boxes. Show me what you've been practicing. Sophie positioned herself at one end of the living room, clutching an imaginary basket with both hands and wearing an expression of intense concentration. She began to walk with exaggerated slowness, pausing every few steps to pretend to scatter flower petals, all while maintaining perfect posture. "How was that?" she asked, her voice full of anticipation, when she finally reached the other end of the room. "That was beautiful," Amara said truthfully. "You look just like a real princess. Daddy says that on Saturday we're all going to be like royalty because it's the most important day of our family's whole life." The innocent observation made Amara's heart squeeze with a wave of tenderness. Over the past few months, Sophie had developed an understanding of marriage that was surprisingly mature for a 6-year-old. Perhaps it was because she had experienced the profound love between her parents and now recognized it blossoming between her father and Amara. "Your daddy is right," Amara said, kneeling down to be at Sophie's level. "Saturday is going to be very special because it's the day we officially become a forever family. Will you still be Miss Amara after you marry Daddy, or will you be something different?" The question was one that Amara and Nathan had discussed at length. Sophie was comfortable with Miss Amara and hadn't shown any desire to call her anything else, which was perfectly fine with both adults. They had decided to let Sophie choose her own terms for their relationship, rather than forcing labels that might feel awkward or artificial. "I'll still be Miss Amara to you," Amara replied reassuringly, "but I'll also be your daddy's wife, which means I'll be part of your family in an official way." "You've been part of our family for a long time already," Sophie said with matter-of-fact, 6-year-old logic. "The wedding is just to make sure everyone else knows it too." Before Amara could respond to this surprisingly wise observation, her phone rang, playing Nathan's distinctive ringtone. Sophie perked up immediately, always excited to talk to her father, especially when he was calling with what he had promised would be the final wedding details. "Hi," Amara said, settling onto the couch and gently pulling Sophie down beside her so they could both participate in the conversation. "Hi. Yourself." Nathan's voice came through the phone, warm and slightly distracted in the way that suggested he was multitasking. "How are my two favorite ladies this evening?" "We're practicing flower girl walking," Sophie announced before Amara could even respond. "I'm getting really good at it. Want me to show you on Saturday?" "I'm counting on it, sweetheart. Actually, that's part of why I'm calling. I have some news about Saturday that I think you're both going to love." Amara felt a little flutter of curiosity mixed with slight apprehension. Nathan's surprises were always wonderful, but they also tended to be more elaborate than she expected, and she was secretly hoping for a relatively simple, intimate wedding ceremony. "What kind of news?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Well, you know how we sent invitations to about 50 people and weren't sure how many would actually be able to come on such short notice." "Yes. Well, we've heard back from almost everyone, and it looks like we're going to have a much bigger celebration than we planned. Isabella's been coordinating with people, and apparently word has spread beyond our original guest list." Amara's pulse quickened with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "How much bigger are we talking about?" "About 120 people, including several families from the library storytime program and some of the children who specifically asked if they could come watch Miss Amara get married." Sophie clapped her hands together with unrestrained delight. "The storytime kids want to come to our wedding." "They do indeed. Apparently, you've made quite an impression on them over the past year, and they're very excited to celebrate with us." Amara felt tears prick at her eyes, completely overwhelmed by the idea that the children she read to every week cared enough about her happiness to want to be part of her wedding day. It was a powerful reminder of how much her life had expanded since meeting Nathan and Sophie, and how many connections she had formed through their shared commitment to serving their community. "That's wonderful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But are we going to have enough space for everyone? And enough food?" "Jeppe from Romano's is catering, and he's bringing enough food for an army. As for space, we're going to use both the children's section and the main reading area, and Isabella has arranged for some additional seating. It's going to be perfect." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Nathan and Sophie discussing the final details, while Amara listened with growing amazement at how their simple library wedding had evolved into what sounded like a genuine community celebration. "One more thing," Nathan said as the call was winding down. "Amara, I need you to promise me something." "What's that?" "Promise me you won't worry about any of the details between now and Saturday. Isabella and I have everything handled, and I want you to just focus on enjoying these last few days before we become officially married." "I promise," Amara said, though she suspected it would be easier said than done. After they hung up, Sophie curled up next to Amara on the couch, suddenly quiet in the way that usually meant she was thinking about something important. "Miss Amara," she said finally, "are you excited about marrying Daddy?" "I'm very excited," Amara replied honestly. "Are you excited about the wedding?" "I'm excited about everything," Sophie said with satisfaction. "I'm excited about the party, and about being a flower girl, and about all the people who want to celebrate with us. But mostly, I'm excited because after Saturday, you'll officially be part of our family forever and ever." The simple statement, delivered with a child's absolute faith in the permanence of love, made Amara's heart feel like it might burst with happiness. "Forever and ever," she agreed, hugging Sophie close and marveling at how much her life had changed since that disappointing evening at Romano's nearly a year ago. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect spring weather that seemed designed specifically for outdoor weddings and new beginnings. Amara woke up in her apartment for the last time, surrounded by the organized chaos of moving boxes and wedding preparations. Feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness that made it impossible to eat more than a few bites of breakfast, Isabella arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, armed with coffee, pastries, and a detailed timeline that would ensure everything went smoothly. Nathan's sister had become one of Amara's closest friends over the past few months, and her calm competence was exactly what Amara needed to get through the morning without dissolving into happy tears. "How are you feeling?" Isabella asked, settling Amara into a chair while she began the process of transforming her into a bride. "Like I'm about to marry the man of my dreams in front of everyone I care about," Amara replied, feeling terrified and thrilled in equal measure. "That sounds about right for a wedding day," Isabella said with a laugh. "Nathan's been awake since 5 this morning, pacing around his apartment and checking his phone every 2 minutes to make sure you haven't changed your mind." The idea of Nathan being nervous made Amara smile. Over the past year, she had seen him confident in business meetings, patient with Sophie's endless questions, and thoughtful about everything from library renovation details to what kind of pizza to order for dinner. But knowing that their wedding day made him nervous too was somehow reassuring. By noon, Amara was completely transformed. Her dress was a flowing creation in ivory silk that managed to be both elegant and comfortable, perfect for a celebration that would involve everything from a formal ceremony to dancing with 6-year-olds. Her hair was arranged in loose waves with small white flowers tucked among the curls, and she wore the pearl earrings Nathan had given her, along with a delicate necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. "You look absolutely radiant," Isabella said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Nathan is going to completely fall over when he sees you." At the library, the transformation was even more dramatic than Amara had expected. The Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center had been decorated with white roses and soft lighting that made the entire space glow with warmth and romance. Chairs had been arranged in curved rows that focused attention on an arbor covered in flowers where the ceremony would take place, and the story tree had been hung with fairy lights that created a magical backdrop for what would surely be the most memorable day of all their lives. Guests were already beginning to arrive when Amara and Isabella pulled up to the library's side entrance. Through the windows, she could see families from Storytime, Nathan's business associates, and what looked like half the neighborhood gathered in the space that had become so meaningful to all of them. "Ready?" Isabella asked, squeezing Amara's hand reassuringly. "More than ready," Amara replied, surprised by how calm she suddenly felt. All the nervousness of the morning had melted away, replaced by a sense of rightness that settled into her bones like coming home. Inside the library, Nathan stood near the flower-covered arbor in a perfectly tailored navy suit that brought out the warm brown of his eyes. When he saw Amara appear at the back of the room, his face lit up with an expression of pure joy that made every person in attendance smile in response. But it was Sophie who truly stole the show. Walking down the makeshift aisle with the careful precision she had been practicing for weeks, wearing a flowing yellow dress that made her look like a small ray of sunshine, she scattered rose petals with the seriousness of someone performing the most important job in the world, pausing occasionally to wave at friends from Storytime who called out her name. When she reached the front, she took her place beside Nathan and turned to watch Amara's approach with glowing pride. The ceremony itself was perfect in its simplicity. They had chosen traditional vows with personal touches that reflected their unique journey, speaking words of commitment and love while surrounded by the books and learning spaces that had brought them together. "I promise to love you not just in the easy moments but in the challenging ones," Nathan said, his voice steady and sure as he looked directly into Amara's eyes. "I promise to build a life with you that honors our past while embracing our future, and to raise Sophie together with the same love and wisdom you bring to everything you do." Amara's vows brought tears to more than half the congregation. "I promise to love you and Sophie with all my heart, to support your dreams and share your burdens, and to create a home where kindness and laughter are as important as ambition and success. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the mother Sophie needs, not by trying to replace what came before, but by adding my own love to the foundation you've already built." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from their assembled friends and family was loud enough to be heard 3 blocks away. Nathan's kiss was tender and full of promise, while Sophie bounced on her toes with excitement, and the children from Storytime clapped with uninhibited enthusiasm. The reception that followed was a joyful celebration that perfectly captured the spirit of their relationship. Jeppy had outdone himself with a menu that included everything from elegant hors d'oeuvres for the adults to star-shaped finger sandwiches that delighted the younger guests. The wedding cake was a 3-tiered masterpiece decorated with sugar flowers that looked almost real, but it was Sophie's request for chocolate cupcakes for the kids that proved most popular. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Nathan said, finding Amara during a quiet moment between dances, "how does it feel to be married?" "It feels like the most natural thing in the world," she replied, admiring the way her wedding ring caught the fairy lights strung throughout the library. "And I love the sound of Mrs. Rodriguez." They danced to their first song as a married couple, while their guests formed a circle around them. But the most touching moment came when Sophie asked if she could have a dance with "my new mama." The 3 of them swayed together in the center of the circle, surrounded by everyone who loved them, while Sophie chattered happily about how perfect everything had turned out. "This is the best wedding in the whole world," she declared, looking between her parents with pure satisfaction. "Everyone is so happy, and the library looks like a fairy tale, and I got to be the best flower girl ever." "You were definitely the best flower girl ever," Amara agreed, lifting Sophie so she could see over the crowd of well-wishers who surrounded them. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart with hugs and promises to visit soon, Nathan, Amara, and Sophie found themselves alone in the decorated library, surrounded by the remnants of their perfect celebration. "Look," Sophie said, pointing to a corner where several children had left drawings and cards congratulating the new family. "Everyone wanted to make sure we knew how happy they are for us." Amara picked up one of the drawings, created by Maria Santos's 7-year-old daughter, showing 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow with the words, "Happy Family," written in careful block letters across the top. "We really are a happy family, aren't we?" she said, looking at Nathan and Sophie with wonder at how much her life had changed. "The happiest," Nathan confirmed, pulling both his wife and daughter into a hug that felt like a promise of all the joy yet to come. 1 year later, Amara stood in the nursery of their penthouse home. Gently rocking in the chair, Nathan had insisted on placing by the window so she could look out at the garden while feeding their newest family member. 3-month-old Elena Marie Rodriguez was a perfect blend of both her parents, with Nathan's dark hair and Amara's warm brown eyes, and a temperament that seemed designed to bring joy to everyone who met her. The pregnancy had been a complete surprise that came just 4 months after their wedding, discovered during what Amara had initially thought was a routine checkup for persistent fatigue. The early months had been challenging, with morning sickness that definitely lived up to its reputation, and lingering fears about how Sophie would adjust to sharing her parents with a sibling. But Sophie had embraced the idea of becoming a big sister with the same boundless enthusiasm she brought to everything that excited her. She had been instrumental in choosing the baby's name, insisting that naming her after both her mama in heaven and her mama on earth was the most perfect thing they could do. She had also appointed herself as the baby's official protector and entertainment committee, singing lullabies she made up herself and providing running commentary about everything Elena needed to know about their family. "Is she sleeping?" Sophie whispered from the nursery doorway, wearing her school uniform and carrying her backpack. At 7 years old, she had blossomed into a confident, articulate child who excelled at school and still loved story time at the library above almost everything else. "Just about," Amara replied softly, gently adjusting the blanket around Elena's tiny form. "Did you have a good day at school?" "I had the best day," Sophie said, settling into the small chair beside the rocking chair that had become their traditional spot for after-school conversations. "We talked about families and social studies, and I got to tell everyone about how our family grew because of love and kindness, and how sometimes the best families are the ones that choose each other." The wisdom in Sophie's words, delivered with such 7-year-old matter-of-factness, never failed to amaze Amara. Over the past year and a half, she had watched this remarkable child navigate the complexities of blended families and new siblings with a grace that many adults could learn from. "What else did you learn today?" Amara asked, always genuinely interested in Sophie's school experiences. "Mrs. Peterson said that next week we're going to have a special visitor who writes children's books. And I told her that you know everything about children's books because you're the best librarian in the whole city. Can the book writer come visit our library too?" "I'm sure we could arrange something," Amara said, making a mental note to contact Sophie's teacher about coordinating a library visit. The Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center had become one of the most popular destinations for authors and illustrators in the city, hosting events that regularly filled every seat and generated long waiting lists of families hoping to attend. Nathan appeared in the doorway, having arrived home from work earlier than usual, as had become his sweet habit since Elena's birth. Fatherhood, the second time around, had brought out an even more tender side of his personality, and he had restructured his work schedule to ensure he could be present for all the small moments that made family life meaningful. "How are my 3 favorite ladies?" he asked, settling onto the floor beside Sophie's chair and reaching up to gently touch Elena's tiny hand. "Elena had a good feeding, and Sophie had an excellent day at school," Amara reported. "And I finished the proposal for the new teen literacy program that I'll be presenting to the library board next month." The incredible success of the Children's Center had led to requests for expanded programming throughout the library system, and Amara had been promoted to Director of Community Outreach, a fulfilling position that allowed her to develop programs that served families throughout the city. Nathan's foundation had continued to generously support her initiatives, but her own innovative ideas and expertise had attracted funding from multiple sources, quickly making her one of the most respected voices in children's literacy in the entire region. "I have news too," Nathan said, his voice carrying the excitement that always accompanied his announcements about new projects. The board approved the expansion proposal. "We're going to be able to create children's learning centers in 6 more libraries throughout the metro area." Sophie bounced in her chair with uncontained excitement. "That means 6 more libraries will be as beautiful as ours." "Even more beautiful," Nathan confirmed with a wink. "Because now we know exactly what works and what doesn't, so we can make each one perfect for the community it serves." As they discussed the details of the expansion project, Elena stirred in Amara's arms, making the small, almost bird-like sounds that indicated she was waking up and would soon be ready for some family interaction. Even at just 3 months old, she was already showing clear signs of being a social baby who loved attention and seemed to find her big sister's voice particularly soothing. "Can I hold her while you and Daddy talk about work stuff?" Sophie asked, having become an absolute expert at infant care over the past few months. "Of course," Amara said, carefully transferring Elena to Sophie's waiting arms. Just remember to support her head. Watching Sophie with Elena never failed to fill Amara with a sense of wonder at the incredible capacity children had for love and nurturing. Sophie spoke to her baby sister in the gentle, sing-song voice that caregivers instinctively used with infants, pointing out the different colors in the nursery and explaining what each of Elena's stuffed animals was named and why they were special. "Elena, this is Mr. Rabbit, and he's very good at helping babies sleep. And this is Princess Bear, who protects against bad dreams. And this is the dragon that Miss Mama, gave me when I was little, and now he helps watch over both of us." The casual way Sophie had started calling her Mama had evolved so gradually over the past year, beginning with Mama Amara and eventually shortening to simply Mama in a way that felt completely natural to all of them. She still occasionally used Miss Amara in public settings, but at home, Amara had simply become another parent who deserved the same title of affection and respect as Nathan. "Sophie," Nathan said, "what would you think about taking Elena to visit the library tomorrow afternoon? Mama has a meeting with some authors who want to create some new programs, and I thought Elena might enjoy seeing where we all first became a family. Can we show her the story tree and the princess reading nook? Oh, and can we read her a story even though she's too little to understand it yet?" "We can do all of those things," Amara said, smiling at Sophie's infectious enthusiasm for introducing Elena to all their favorite places. "Though you're right that she's still too young to follow most stories." "That's okay," Sophie said with complete 7-year-old wisdom. "She'll understand that we love reading to her, and that's the most important part." Anyway, that evening, after Elena had been fed and settled in for the night, and Sophie had diligently completed her homework with Nathan's patient help, the three of them gathered in the living room for their traditional family time. It was a comforting routine they had established during Amara's pregnancy and continued without interruption after Elena's birth. A special time when they shared the highlights of their day and planned exciting adventures. "I have something special to show you both," Amara said, retrieving a letter from her desk that had arrived that afternoon. This came from the National Library Association. She opened the official-looking envelope and read aloud, "Dear Mrs. Rodriguez, it is our distinct pleasure to inform you that the Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center has been selected to receive this year's Excellence in Community Service Award. Your innovative approach to children's literacy programming and your unwavering dedication to serving diverse communities has set a new standard for public libraries throughout the entire country." Sophie clapped her hands together with unrestrained delight. "Our library won an award, a really important one, a very important one," Nathan confirmed, his voice filled with immense pride. "This means that libraries all over the country are going to want to learn from what we've created here. Does that mean other kids in other cities will get to have beautiful libraries like ours?" Sophie asked, her eyes shining with hope. "It means exactly that," Amara said, feeling happy tears prick at her eyes. "We're going to be able to help create programs that reach thousands and thousands of children." As they excitedly discussed the incredible implications of the award and what it would mean for their future projects, Elena's soft cries came through the baby monitor, gently indicating that she was ready for it was time for Elena's evening feeding. Amara started to get up to take care of her daughter, but Nathan gently caught her hand. "I'll get her," he offered. "You've been taking care of absolutely everyone all day long. Let me handle bedtime duties tonight." Watching Nathan head off toward the nursery, Amara was overcome by a wave of gratitude so incredibly profound that it practically took her breath away. Just 2 years prior, she had been a woman eating dinner alone in an upscale restaurant, fully convinced that disappointment was all she could realistically expect from life. Now, however, she was completely surrounded by a family that loved her unconditionally, doing work that made a real difference in her community, and looking forward to a future brimming with possibilities she had never even dared to imagine were possible. "Mama," Sophie said, snuggling up beside her on the couch, "do you think Elena will love the library as much as we do when she gets older?" "I think Elena will love whatever makes her happy," Amara responded, wrapping her arm around Sophie and marveling at just how solid and real this child felt in her embrace. But I really hope she'll love books and stories, because they're fundamentally what brought all of us together in the first place. I hope so too, Sophie said with a deep sense of satisfaction. Because our story is seriously the best one ever, and I really want Elena to be part of all the chapters that come next in our lives. Nathan came back from the nursery a few minutes later, carrying Elena, who was now completely content and sleepy after her feeding. He settled into the chair across from Amara and Sophie, cradling his youngest daughter while his older daughter snuggled contentedly against his wife. And for a brief moment, the room was filled with the kind of perfect peace that descends when everyone you love is exactly where they're supposed to be and want to be. You know, he said softly, I never in a million years would have imagined that paying for a complete stranger's dinner could actually lead to all of this. And I definitely never imagined that being stood up on a blind date could actually be the best thing that ever happened to me, Amara replied with a smile. And I never imagined that giving someone a flower made out of a napkin could somehow help create the most perfect family in the whole wide world, Sophie added, making both adults laugh out loud at her uncanny ability to find her place in just about any conversation imaginable. As they all prepared for bed later that evening, with Elena sleeping peacefully in her crib and Sophie settled comfortably in her room with the latest book in a series about a girl detective that had completely captured her imagination, Nathan and Amara stood together out on the balcony overlooking the garden where they had shared so many incredibly important moments. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind and gently resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about how incredibly grateful I am for absolutely all of it," Amara replied, leaning back against his comforting warmth. "For Sophie's truly generous heart that brought us all together in the first place. For your incredible kindness to a complete stranger that started absolutely everything. For Elena sleeping soundly and safely in her crib. For work that feels so deeply meaningful and important. And for this amazing family that we've built together from the ground up. I'm grateful too," Nathan said, his voice soft with contentment and peace. "For your courage in saying yes to dinner with complete strangers. For your incredible love that made Sophie bloom into the amazing person she is today and taught me how to genuinely hope again. And for Elena, who represents absolutely everything beautiful about our shared future together." They stood there in comfortable silence for a few minutes, looking out at the twinkling city lights and the beautiful garden that had witnessed both their engagement and so many other incredibly important moments in their relationship. "Nathan," Amara said finally, "do you ever actually wonder what would have happened if Sophie hadn't noticed that I looked sad that night at Romano's?" "I try my absolute best not to think about it," Nathan replied honestly. "Because I honestly can't even begin to imagine any version of my life that doesn't include you in it now. I truly love you," she said, turning in his arms to face him directly. "I love you, and Sophie and Elena, and this beautiful life we've created together more than I ever even knew it was possible to love anyone or anything." "I love you too," Nathan replied, kissing her with the incredible tenderness that had characterized their relationship from the very beginning. "Forever and always, just like we promised each other." As they made their way back inside, checking on both of their daughters before finally settling into their own bed, Amara felt a deep and profound sense of completion that had absolutely nothing to do with endings and absolutely everything to do with the ongoing joy of living a life that was filled to the brim with both purpose and love. The Elena Rodriguez Memorial Children's Learning Center would undoubtedly continue to serve families for generations and generations to come. Sophie would undoubtedly grow up confident in her own innate ability to choose kindness above all else and create real and lasting positive change in the world. Elena would be raised surrounded by books and stories and the deep understanding that love can come in an infinite number of forms. And Nathan and Amara would continue building an incredibly strong and supportive partnership that honored their shared past while embracing all the beautiful and limitless possibilities that their future undoubtedly held. Sometimes, the most extraordinary and unforgettable love stories actually begin with the simplest and most understated acts of kindness, Amara thought to herself as she drifted peacefully off to sleep in her husband's arms. And sometimes getting absolutely everything you never even knew you wanted All started with someone caring enough to pay for a complete stranger's dinner on what felt like the worst night of her entire life. In the nursery down the hall, Helena slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams 3-month-old babies dream. While in the room right next door, Sophie slept with a genuine smile on her face, completely surrounded by her beloved books and the absolute certainty that she was loved beyond all measure. And in the master bedroom, Nathan and Amara slept the deep, contented sleep of people who had both found their rightful place in the world and knew without even the slightest doubt that they were exactly where they were always meant to be. Their incredible story had begun with a significant amount of disappointment and loneliness, but it had undoubtedly bloomed into something far more beautiful and extraordinary than any of them could have ever even imagined. And the absolute best part of it all was that it was still actively being written, day after day.